So yesterday, Mark and I were lucky enough to speak to a really remarkable young woman, 27 years old. Her name is Lizzie Greenwood. She's a proud activist. She was a project manager and she was on her way to becoming a psychologist when the horrors that we have all been witnessing over the last year came to light in Gaza. And she tried, like many of us, many different things to get the powers that be to listen. Marches, campaigning, all the sorts of things that so many of us have been doing. And it just hasn't been enough for Lizzie. She is horrified by the fact that this government is still arming and funding the genocide in Israel, and she has taken the very extreme step of going on hunger strike. She is surviving on 250 calories a day, which is what the Palestinians are supposed to be surviving on, and she's incredible. So I think it was day 19 when we spoke to her. We would really, really appreciate it if you watch this video right to the end. That helps the algorithm, because we want to get this out to as many people as possible. As you'll hear in the interview, Lizzie contacted over 30 politicians, and none of them have answered her. So let's make this really difficult for them to ignore this remarkable young woman. So Lizzie, here we are, day 19. Obviously, the first question we have to ask you is, how are you feeling?
Probably how you would expect me to feel, really. I'm really, really exhausted. I'm having to conserve a lot of my energy. I'm, having a lot of stomach pains, chest pains, body aches, lots of sort of anxiety and brain fog as well. I did go in to the hospital for some checks a couple of days ago, and because I've been taking an electrolyte drink, they said most of my levels are okay, but I do have a really high level of ketones, which is going to become unsustainable quite quickly, and that's part of what is making me feel so rubbish.
Yeah. And what does that mean with the ketones then? When they say unsustainable, what does that mean?
Yeah, so ketones are basically something that happens when your body goes into a starvation process. It's not getting enough carbohydrates or sugar, so you start having to produce, your body has to start producing its own source to live on, and that can be in the form of ketones. When you have a really, really high level of ketones in your system, it can make you feel very, very shaky, very tired, very faint, very sick. So I'm dealing with a lot of nausea as well. And essentially it just they'll keep building in my system until I eat something, really.
Right. Oh my goodness. So it's interesting, because I don't know about you, when you said I'm feeling how you would expect me to. Actually, I've never gone for 18, 19 days on 250 calories. And that 250 calories is very important, isn't it? Because that's what Palestinians are expected to survive on.
Exactly, and that's part of the point I want to make is, I'm dealing with all of these things and all of these symptoms, and so are hundreds of thousands of Palestinian people, but then they're also having to deal with being constantly displaced and bombed and just an unbearable weight of grief as well at the same time. And I just don't think any of us can really imagine what that's like. We have a very loose understanding of starving, but what that means fully, and especially in that context, I just don't think any of us could imagine just how despicable that is, and what a humanitarian disaster that really is, to have people being put in that position.
We saw a video yesterday, didn't we, that really broke us. It was lots of, they've been asked to move again, and it was a woman. She was so exhausted. She had two massive, there's nylon bags. She had children that she was just literally having to drag along. They had no shoes on, and I'm just thinking of them again now. And you being so tired and thinking, and she's doing that on 250 calories.
They're having to travel miles. I just want to sort of take us back a bit. So what made you decide to do this? What was your was this a sort of a gradual, as we've all had, increasing sense of horror since October the 7th? And certainly for us as a family, I mean, we've been plugged into the sort of Palestinian-Israel crisis for many years before that, which is why for us, it's a natural connection to say this doesn't start on October the 7th. I'm just curious to know the narrative of getting you to the point to decide to do this.
Yeah, I think, an increasing sense of horror, disgust, desperation. And I think there were sort of two maybe really specific events that sort of really triggered this line of thinking. And the first was, Keir Starmer standing on international television and saying the UK stands unequivocally with Israel, knowing that that was a lie, because we have had a year of resistance, of protest, direct action, petitioning, boycotts, you name it. Just brazen lying. And then it was, it's hard to pinpoint a single video that comes out of Gaza that really triggers you, because they're all so triggering and upsetting alone. But there was especially one, it was seeing the Palestinians stripped and lined up and walk towards open pits, and on the same day hearing that 11 children had been burned alive in Al-Maghazi stadium.
Such a dark day that was. Dark day.
Really dark. And as someone that was a youth ambassador for the Holocaust Education Trust, part of a project to make sure that that's never supposed to happen again, these sort of events, we're supposed to have learned, we're supposed to be doing things differently. And then it's not only happening again, I'm being forced to be complicit in it, because it's my taxes, it's my country, my politicians. These weapons are being made less than an hour's drive away from me in factories. And I really object to that with every single fiber of my being, as a human, as an activist, as a UK citizen. I really resent and feel disgusted that is what is being forced upon me by Keir Starmer and his government. And that is how we are defining British identity moving forward, is they are defining British people as genocide supporters, as child murderers. It really is a child-hating government, in the sense that we have a massive child poverty crisis here that's not being addressed. We've got starving children here going to school with empty stomachs, and then supporting a regime that is predominantly and purposefully targeting and killing children abroad. And I feel disgust. And as I say, I've tried everything. I've tried all these different forms of activism. And maybe at this point, the only thing I really do have left to fight with is my body and my life. And if that's the case, well, then that's what I'm going to do. That's the position that I really felt I got forced into.
Can I just ask, I mean, I think I'm in a state of PTSD about this being a Labour government and a Labour Party, and a humanitarian lawyer who is our Prime Minister.
A human rights liar, yeah.
Human rights liar, absolutely.
Israel has the right to cut off the water. I will never forgive or forget, never. Water.
I just have a struggle. So I totally empathise, because I struggle with it's not even the sense of a sinister, supercilious disregard. It's an empty vacuum of no acknowledgement of the truth.
For 70% of the population want this to stop. They don't. We don't want to be arming this army.
Exactly. It's laughing in the face of our democracy, isn't it? It is a blatant disregard for it. And it is just shockingly inhuman. But you've had the Labour Friends of Israel group has been a very active driving force in that party for a long time, so I wasn't necessarily that shocked by it. I'm shocked that they're still even trying to deny that it is a genocide. That is brazen.
I have never used that word, because I understand the meaning of that word. That was I felt so hopeless on that day. And we are, all of us, aren't we? We're all looking for pinholes of light all the time, and that's what we're working with. But then it was shut out. I thought, my God, he's standing up again, just blatant.
All the time. Yeah, he's doing that, and it really echoes the Israeli sentiment, where we have Israeli officials who've openly said it's not a genocide because they're not people. And he's supporting that kind of, by saying that himself, he is supporting that kind of language, that kind of genocidal intent, and the erasure of an entire people. That's how dangerous it is when he stands there and says things. And and then you've got that alongside the trying to label anyone who stands up against this as a terrorist rather than what it does make you, which is a humanitarian and just a human being at your core if you want to fight back against this.
We were talking the other day, weren't we, about how, God, do you remember the first time we said ceasefire? I was actually on the red carpet and I had ceasefire on my two hands. And I was described as a Hamas sympathiser. But we were like, how did that get weaponised? And we thought that would fade away. But actually, it's become more and more weaponised. When you look at America at the moment, where they're hunting down people in government that have asked for a ceasefire, we're just dumbfounded.
I also think, Lizzie, the thing about your story, which is why we're going to push this and push your story on all other platforms, the most sinister sort of development and realization and sort of horror that I feel about the mainstream media is it's not what they necessarily say, though most of the media is saying everything a la, here's the press release from the Israeli IDF, representatives, PR, look at the Amsterdam, riots, is the fact that our media manages to massage the story by omission. And in many regards, the fact that we haven't seen your story is another act of omission by the media. And
that's a decision.
So, how do you think the editors of these news organizations, are they conscious of this? Are they aware of this? Are they actively sitting in these offices and in these editorial meetings going, don't print that, don't do that, don't talk about that?
Well, the same day as Amsterdam, Save the Children put out the 44% of people killed in Gaza have been children. That didn't make it anywhere.
It doesn't make it anywhere.
There's got to be those decisions, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. These are very, very conscious decisions. And, there are and I know because I've spoken to them, there are journalists within these organizations, Pay and Papers, who have been trying over the last year to push more honest and sympathetic journalism around the war in Gaza. And they're getting denied. They're getting pushed back by their editors. They are not allowed to print these pieces. I was part of a group that really early on met with the editor of the Manchester Evening News, because they, on their website, were having just pro-Israeli adverts, basically spreading the lies about what happened on October 7th, the propaganda, unverified, unchecked. They had a banner across the top of their website saying Hamas beheaded babies on the Manchester Evening News website, which is supposed to be impartial, and they claim that they vet all of their adverts.
Wow.
So I met with their editor to discuss this, and to voice the disgust of our community, and to make sure this would never happen again. And the editor was vocally very sympathetic and talked about wanting to promote Palestine stories more effectively, and then eventually, I assume, got a tap on the shoulder from someone, because immediately ceased all contact with us, stopped working with us, stopped replying to our emails. And then those adverts, after getting taken down and after us getting assured there was an investigation into where they came from, reappeared on the website.
It's so sinister, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and we're coming off the back of, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and I don't understand how this isn't being treated anywhere near as seriously as that.
Well, there are no equivalences. I mean, we keep hearing Russian interference in the American election, Iranian interference in the American. Hang on a minute. This is a supposition. This isn't even a guarantee. But we are barefacedly, in the light of day, seeing Israeli manipulation through donations. But this isn't electoral
130 million to Trump. 130 million handed over in front of everyone.
So the question is, so the media is avoiding it in part by omission. There's this sinister sort of campaign, which there is, to kind of change the narrative. Why do you think there are many in the in the British public who are sympathetic, but many who don't engage with it or won't engage with it? Why do you think that is?
I think there's a few reasons. I think genuinely there are still a lot of people who don't know quite how directly involved we are in it, and they're not actually necessarily aware that not only did we install this state in the first place, and we installed it in totally bad faith. We installed it with Winston Churchill using language around replacing one inferior race with a superior one. And also that, we continue to fund and arm it and provide intel that is allowing them to target civilians to this day. And I think the reason they have to keep that very under wraps is because people would quite rightly be outraged. As I say, we've got a child poverty crisis in this country. We've got food bank shortages. We've got a mental health crisis. Why are we sending money and supplies and resources to Israel to fuel their war? Why is that the priority? And as soon as people start thinking in that way, then the government's in trouble. So I think they have to keep it very, very under wraps. And it's ironic, really, because I get called a traitor, a national traitor, because I'm pro-Palestine and a terrorist and all these things. And I actually think, but I'm so much more nationalistic than them, because I want that money to be going to my country, to my people, to people suffering. And I don't want my national identity to be genociders and child murderers. I think we're better than that. We deserve better. So I think, honestly, that makes me more of a patriot than Keir Starmer by a long shot.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
And you know, thank God for people like you that are continuing past the point of weariness or hopelessness to continue to you know, voice this, because really we at about 6 months it hit us, didn't we? We said more and more people are just going to go by the wayside because of the feeling of hopelessness. So we want to thank you so much for what you're doing. We're worried for you from being parents. You're such a wonderful young woman, so we're worried about you and your health, but we so understand your passion. And you know, we often sit here saying, what can we do next? What can we, how can we disrupt? How can we make noise? How can we wake people up again? So we understand where this has come from.
Can I ask you, how far are you willing to go? I mean, it's a bold...
Yeah, it's a good question, because as you say, people are desperate, and in a way, sort of linking back to what you said, we are put into these desperate situations where we have to make increasingly extreme acts of resistance because of the lack of action of a majority of people who aren't perhaps taking up their moral and human responsibility to do something for whatever reason. And that does put me in a position where I do have to do something more extreme. I have to put more on the line. I'm willing to take it as far as I have to make this point, because I am so exhausted, I'm so disgusted, and I have friends who are Palestinian, and I owe them a debt because it is my country, it is my complicity.
What would you need for them to say? Because at the moment they're so rude and disgusting, they haven't even bothered to answer. We were talking earlier, weren't we? And you said you've been in contact with something like 30 MPs and had no answer except a policeman around your house. Very nice.
To double check on you not being a threat to others, am I right? That's what you said.
Yeah, to myself and others. I think I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to do something extreme. Not that what I'm doing isn't extreme, but
So imagine that we managed to get this video to a place where one of these fuckers actually listens to what you're saying. What would you need to come off this hunger strike?
I need Keir Starmer to find a backbone of some form, like 5 prime ministers before him, because there were 5 prime ministers who managed to put arms embargoes on Israel, including Tony Blair, of all people, a famous war criminal, Margaret Thatcher, I think David Cameron maybe as well, and they all managed to do it. So it's just another level of just moral depravity that he is not willing to do it.
I learned that from your Instagram, and I have to say I was really shocked. I said to you, didn't I? Ted Heath, Margaret Thatcher.
I know.
Well, and it's interesting you should say that, because I was reading somewhere else, because we've been following the American election. Even Ronald Reagan pushed back against the Israeli aggressions. I mean, we're looking at right wingers, and Keir Starmer can't do it.
International human rights.
Staggering.
Yeah, it raises so many questions, doesn't it? And like, what kind of person are we letting in charge of our country? What kind of coward, and how corrupt? What kind of corruption has got hold of our government that we're at this point? It's really upsetting, and I think people should be more upset and more angry about it, because what it says, the threat that it poses to us as a country as well, and our future.
That's why on the marches we say, in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. Because if you can treat one group of human beings like this, you could treat any. And we're seeing it spreading to Lebanon, maybe to Iraq, maybe Jordan, maybe we don't know. So we're looking, actually, if you can't do it just for the Palestinians, we're doing it for all of us.
Yeah.
So for everybody that's watching you today and I know will be incredibly impressed by you, what can people do to help you and to support you?
So I will say over the last 18 days, I've had a lot of people message me with ideas about other forms of protest and resistance. And my very honest answer to those people is, if you've got an idea, then act on it. Take it upon yourself to organize and make that happen. You know, you have a duty to resist as much as I do. That's on you as well. It's not, we can't keep just putting the responsibility of this on a few activists and a few groups. So that would be my encouragement, would be to act on your own initiative and advice, and just be loud and be disruptive as possible, and just do not let people keep getting away with this, and do not let them be in a position where they feel they can claim on behalf of the British people that we are all genocide supporters, that we are all child killers, because we're not. And no one should be satisfied with that. No one should be willing to let that rest. And it also means, you know, not letting them prescribe organizations like Palestine Action, who are put in that position because of the government's inaction. They are being forced to act. They are being forced to directly resist. You know, it's supporting protesters and activists in the important work that they're doing, and also just platforming and elevating Palestinian voices in the first place. Because, you know, I said this to the MEN when they asked me if I knew anyone else they should talk to, and I said, you've not spoken to a single Palestinian person in a year. You've not platformed a single Palestinian, so maybe start there.
Yeah.
And I think also, if everybody could email their MPs, let's flood all the MPs. Would you mind awfully answering Lizzie?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a really good point you make, though, as well, about everyone sort of making some kind of vital stand or some kind of campaign. Because I think what happens in the mainstream and the members of the public and people sort of think there's that group of people who do that. And that's great, sympathetic, but let's always turn to them. Whereas actually I was driving just through a neighborhood locally the other day, and there was sort of a bunch of people who had just done it. It wasn't massively publicized. And I think the more you see it just happening in more and more places, rather than on prescribed dates and days and events, the more normalized protest becomes, the more normalized, you know.
Exactly. You have to get through the bystander effect.
Yes.
You know, you have to actually take the responsibility on yourselves. And one other thing I might add is you also have to be willing to have, and this is a very anti-British sentiment, but you have to be willing to have very, very uncomfortable and awkward conversations and be awkward and disruptive to get this point across. And you might have to be willing to speak to someone who's coming from a totally different place from you, to meet them where they are and bring them up. And it is just constantly sharing that message of, this isn't just for Palestine. It, you know, as human beings, we absolutely, that should be enough. It should be enough that the Palestinian people are suffering for us to act. But it does also impact all of us here at home. This is a British problem. It does affect you, and it is your responsibility. And what happens with Palestine will shape the world that we all live in, that our children are born into, and their children's children. And if we allow it to be a world where this kind of thing is allowed to happen unpunished, then we should all be terrified of what kind of world that might be that we're creating right now. You know, so it's a global responsibility. So it's being willing to speak up, because I read a really good quote recently, and I'll butcher it now, but it was something to do with sometimes you speak up not because you think it will change another person, but because if you don't, it changes you. If you are someone who doesn't speak, you know, it changes who you are, and you've got to be able to live with yourself at the end of the day.
Very powerful.
And you know what I've add to that, you know, I'm 60 next week, and I've never been an activist in anything ever in my life. And I've been a bit of a waste of space, really. And though there is a cost to being an activist, especially in my showbiz world, there is also an incredible thing that happens inside you, because solidarity actually is a beautiful thing. Like, the marches, and like when you meet somebody that you know understands, it's just actual goosebumps
Yeah.
stuff.
On each other.
And though I say I feel like I've lost so much of myself from before October 7th, what
Yeah.
I've got in place I prefer. So many stupid things are irrelevant now. And so believe that you could be an activist. You can, whatever age you are, whatever life might have been before, the ripple effect is real. And the most horrific things happen when good men and women stand by and do nothing to butcher.
100%. Yeah, I feel exactly the same. And it's so ironic that they got called hate marches, because I see nothing but like the most extreme forms of love on those marches. And, you know, I had one of my friends who's Palestinian say to me recently, he said, even our anger is love. We are angry because we love, because people we love are suffering.
And it says so much about the other side, if there's sides. I hate this kind of slicing because there shouldn't be sides. It's about humanity. But it says so much about their perception of love and solidarity to describe it and see it as hate. It says more about them than it does about us. It says so much more.
And you know,
about
a really positive thing, both Mark and Lizzie, I have found such comfort and revelations in so many different ways from the Jewish community that are standing against this and that march with us, and that many of us follow on Instagram, and who proudly say over and over again, not in my name. It's a beautiful religion that I have. You know, my father's Arabic, he's Christian, but I didn't know much about Judaism, and I've learned a lot more about it. And that is the hope. That's what we want. We want more of that.
Yeah.
Because this is never about religion. This is not about religion. This is about land.
It's about
and
land
oil.
and
Absolutely. And I see that hearts and minds are changing. You know, there's two wars going on. There is the physical war, and there's the war of propaganda. Yes. And in terms of the war of propaganda, it does feel like we are winning, and we are winning because Palestinians just prove through their existence, just through their nature, their culture, and their resilience, their love, their compassion. They prove how evil this whole thing is.
Yes.
And they really help us to dismantle all the anti-Arab rhetoric we've been hearing for so long, all the justification of bombing the Middle East and destroying those communities. It really is becoming harder and harder to swallow and accept. You know, we're a much less naive, a much less indoctrinated culture than we were before, and that is just a huge
We're awakened. You're right. We're awakened.
Yeah. They tried to weaponize woke, but to be awake is surely a wonderful thing.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want to.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, Lizzie, we're going to let you rest
Yes.
because we know this will have been a lot for you doing this.
Yes.
And so, again, we honour you and your choice for the way that you are elevating the voices for the silenced. I mean, they can't speak. They can't. The Palestinians have no voice. So thank you so much. All our love to your family and friends who must be worried.
Oh, bless you. Oh, thank you so much. No, it was a real honour to speak to you, and this has been really lovely. Thank you. And my mum was very, very excited as well.
Oh,